Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In 1984, the U.S. Mint produced over 8 billion 1-cent coins, seemingly unremarkable tokens meant to pass from hand to hand, unnoticed in pockets and cash drawers. The Lincoln cent, as it had since 1909, featured Abraham Lincoln's profile on the obverse, his gaze fixed solemnly to the right. On the reverse stood the Lincoln Memorial, a neoclassical symbol that had adorned the coin since 1959. Everything about it was familiar, routine. Yet somewhere between the pressure of the coin presses and the fatigue of the dies, an error crept in, a subtle deformation that would not be noticed immediately, but would ripple through the collecting world once it came to light. The anomaly was small, easily missed, but when seen, impossible to unsee. A single die, likely at the Philadelphia Mint, had begun to degrade ever so slightly. As more coins were struck, a slight doubling became apparent, not across the entire coin, but concentrated on one area in particular, Lincoln's EAR.AT first. Only a few pairs of watchful eyes caught it. It didn't scream for attention. The doubling wasn't dramatic, like a wide date or a doubled motto. But once a collector from Ohio examined his pocket change under a magnifier, he paused. Lincoln's ear looked wrong. There was a faint but distinct outline just behind the main ear structure. Not a scratch, not damage. It looked like a second ear. A shadow ear. He shared the coin with fellow enthusiasts at a local coin club. Curiosity turned into scrutiny. Others began inspecting their 1984 cents. More examples began surfacing. Not many, but enough to confirm it wasn't a one-off mistake or a post-mint alteration. This was a genuine double die error, and one with a strangely organic effect. It was dubbed the 1984 doubled ear, since the term caught on quickly. Doubled ear. It sounded unusual, almost funny, but it described exactly what was wrong, or perhaps, what made the coin special. The doubling affected only Lincoln's ear, giving it the appearance of having an extra fold or a second curve behind it. It was clear under magnification, unmistakable when pointed out, and entirely unintentional. What caused it was typical of double die errors, a slight misalignment during the hubbing process, where the coin die is created by pressing it with a master design. If the die shifts even slightly between impressions, the resulting coin can show a duplicated feature. In this case, it just so happened to fall on Lincoln's ear, and nowhere else. The fascination wasn't just with the error itself, but with its uniqueness. Most double dies show obvious signs in letters, numbers, or broad facial features. But this one was focused so specifically on one tiny element that it gave the coin a kind of secret, an Easter egg for the observant. Collectors began hunting. Dealers took note. Coin grading companies started labeling certified examples as 1984 1C doubled ear. The excitement wasn't frenzied, but it was steady. People realized that while the doubling wasn't easy to find, it was distinct enough to separate true examples from ordinary cents. And that made all the difference. Over time, the coin's reputation grew. It became a sort of gateway into error collecting, a subtle, affordable piece of numismatic intrigue. At first, in the mid to late 1980s, when the error was still being confirmed and documented, prices hovered modestly around a few dollars. But as collectors recognized its scarcity, and more importantly, its authenticity, demand increased. By the early 2000s, well-preserved examples were bringing in $20 to $30. Coins in higher grades, especially those graded MS65 or above by PCGS or NGC, began fetching over $100. The doubling had to be strong and centered on the ear. Coins with wear or poor detail weren't as desirable. The market was discerning, but consistent. Then came a twist that few expected. A researcher published an article in a numismatic journal, noting that the error might have been caused not just by die misalignment, but possibly by slight overpolishing of the die during production. This meant that what was once thought of as purely a double die might also have had elements of die abrasion contributing to the visual effect. That raised questions and added even more intrigue. Was it a hybrid error? A perfect storm of mint conditions aligning to produce a unique effect? If so, it made the 1984 doubled ear cent not just an error, but a mystery. Collectors didn't run from the confusion, they embraced it. It made the coin even more desirable. The error didn't just live in coin shops or collections. It started popping up in eBay listings, auction catalogs, and even the occasional estate sale. Most people had no idea what they had. Many 1984 cents were just tossed into jars or spent without a second glance. But those who knew, who had trained their eyes, were ready to spot the shadow ear when it appeared. Some finds were thrilling. One man in Texas discovered 3 examples in a single roll of circulated cents, each bearing a distinct doubling. He sold 2 and kept the third, now encased in a protective slab, a personal reminder of the thrill of the hunt. Another woman in New Jersey found one in her late father's coin box, a coin he'd set aside decades earlier without knowing its full value. The doubling, while subtle, had become iconic. Entire error guides dedicated pages to the coin. YouTube videos zoomed in on the ear, highlighting its unique shape. It wasn't just an error, it was a conversation starter. And even as the years passed, and as billions more cents were minted in the decades after, the 1984 doubled ear cent remained a fixture in the collector's mind. It was approachable, rare, but not impossibly rare. A gem hiding in plain sight. A copper-clad whisper of imperfection in a sea of mechanical precision. Today, the value of the 1984 doubled ear cent varies depending on condition and visibility of the doubling. Worn, circulated examples can still sell for $10 to $20. In higher grades, especially those certified as MS65 or better, values often range from $150 to $250. But the strongest examples, with bold doubling and crisp luster, have reached auction prices of over $400, especially when slabbed and verified by top grading services. A single cent, once meant to disappear into the background of commerce, now commands respect not for what it was supposed to be, but for what it accidentally became. A reminder that even in the smallest denomination, the rarest stories can be found. In 1990, the U.S. Mint was running at full speed. Billions of coins were being struck to keep pace with the economy, and the Lincoln cent, ever present since 1909, remained a staple of American currency. That year, production of the penny continued at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. Most of these coins were routine, unremarkable, destined for parking meters, cash registers, and forgotten jars. But within this immense sea of copper-plated zinc, one small variation slipped past the rigorous eyes of mint inspectors. A variation so subtle, yet so significant, it would later turn the numismatic world on its head. To the casual observer, a 1990 penny didn't stand out. Lincoln's profile appeared unchanged, as solemn and resolute as ever. The reverse still bore the Lincoln Memorial, its pillars etched with uniformity. But for collectors, especially those who understood mint marks and what they represented, one detail, or lack thereof, caught attention: the absence of the S. This was not a matter of fading or wear. It was something deeper, more fundamental. In 1990, proof cents, high-quality strikes meant for collectors, were produced at the San Francisco Mint, as they had been for years. These coins were always marked with an S mint mark. But one collector, combing through a proof set purchased directly from the U.S. Mint, noticed that the set bore no mint mark at all. That small missing letter sparked a quiet revolution. It wasn't a fluke of circulation or damage. This coin was a genuine proof strike. Mirror-like surfaces, sharp details, no sign of handling. But the absence of the S was undeniable. And given that the San Francisco Mint was the sole producer of proof coins in 1990, the realization set in. A small batch of proof cents had been struck with a die that was missing its mint mark altogether. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Mint mark punches were manually added to proof dies during this era, a deliberate step in the production process. Somehow, a die had escaped this step and entered the proof coinage line unmarked. The result? A true minting blunder, but one with pristine surfaces and razor-sharp definition, a contradiction that collectors dream of. At first, disbelief reigned. How could such a coin make it past quality control? Proof coins were inspected far more closely than regular circulation strikes. But slowly, other examples began surfacing. Not many, just a handful, but enough to prove this wasn't a solitary mistake. The search intensified. Collectors began inspecting their 1990 proof sets with renewed urgency. Dealers put out feelers. Grading services took note and began designating these coins as 1990 NOS proof. The market responded with a mixture of confusion, excitement, and desire. Those who had the insight to act early found themselves in possession of a coin that was growing in both fame and value. As coin publications began writing about the error, its legend grew. The 1990 NOS proof set had become a symbol of how even the most carefully crafted products could harbor hidden anomalies. It was the absence that made it valuable. One small missing character, no larger than the tip of a pencil, transformed an ordinary proof set into a coin of legend. The mint mark wasn't just a letter, it was proof of origin and assurance of process. Without it, everything came into question. And collectors loved questions. Through the late 1990s and into the early 2000s, the coin's value climbed steadily. In auctions, examples certified by PCGS or NGC in PR67 or PR68 began commanding thousands. They were rare, but more than that, they were unmistakably authentic and undeniably odd. But what elevated this coin beyond the ranks of ordinary mint errors was its pristine form. Unlike double dies or off-center strikes, the 1990 NOS proof didn't look flawed. It looked perfect. That perfection, combined with its quiet deviation from the norm, gave it an almost mythic presence in collections. One collector from Florida recalled discovering his example while reorganizing old proof sets he had bought from the mint decades earlier. He noticed something odd with the cent, no mint mark under the date. At first, he thought it might be a misprint or damage. But under magnification, he saw it was completely absent, not rubbed off or worn. When he had it authenticated and graded, it came back PR69 deep cameo, near perfect. He held onto it for years, watching its value rise with each passing auction. Another collector, younger and newer to the hobby, stumbled upon one through a family heirloom. His grandfather had passed down several proof sets, untouched for decades. He, too, found a cent without a mint mark and had it graded. It sold at auction for enough to pay off a year's worth of college tuition. Over time, the number of authenticated examples remained limited. Fewer than 200 are believed to exist today, making the 1990 NOS proof one of the rarest modern errors known in U.S. coinage. The twist, however, came years later when former mint employees revealed how strict protocols around mint mark punching sometimes allowed for human error. While rare, these oversights occurred more than once in U.S. history. Similar NOS proofs had emerged in 1970, 1971, and 1975. But the 1990 version stood apart. Not only was it the last known NOS proof error, but it also came during an era of increased automation and tighter controls. It marked the end of an era, a final breath of human imperfection in a system becoming ever more mechanical. Ironically, the very things that should have prevented the error, precision, oversight, control, only magnified its importance. Because it happened when it wasn't supposed to, its rarity was cemented. Today, the 1990 NOS proof set commands significant respect. In lower grades or impaired sets, it can still bring several $100s. In certified proof grades, like PR67 and PR68, prices often range between $3,000 and $5,000. But when one in top condition, like PR69 deep cameo, hits the market, the number spikes sharply. At auction, The finest examples have sold for over $20. 0.1 cent minted without a mint mark. Proof to perfection. Its silence where a letter should be speaks louder than most errors ever could. A testament to the idea that sometimes it's what's missing that makes all the difference. In 2014, the U.S. Mint struck more than 8 billion Lincoln cents, a staggering number that made the 1-cent coin feel more disposable than ever. These copper-plated zinc coins move through the machinery of modern minting with mechanical precision, most destined to vanish into pockets, cash drawers, and dusty corners. But hidden in the chaos of mass production, one anomaly quietly slipped through, a mistake so precise, so visually jarring, that it turned a coin worth 1 cent into an object of intense scrutiny. The Lincoln cent had long been a constant in American life, its obverse bearing the same profile of Abraham Lincoln since 1909. By 2014, the reverse design, depicting the Union Shield, was firmly established, introduced in 2010 to replace the Lincoln Memorial. The shield symbolized national unity, and its clean, modern lines made it distinct among contemporary coinage. The year carried no grand historical shifts, no special commemoration for the penny. And yet, amid this ordinary run, a few 2014 cents emerged bearing an unmistakable error. It wasn't immediately obvious. This wasn't a coin that screamed its rarity at first glance. In fact, many passed over it completely. But a closer look at Lincoln's profile under magnification revealed something unexpected. A ghostly second image of the president's face, slightly offset, hovered just behind the first, an unmistakable doubling. But this wasn't the common machine doubling caused by die shift or bounce. This was crisper, cleaner. A true double DIE.IT began with one collector in Michigan, sorting through a freshly unwrapped roll from the bank. The coins clinked together like any others, light, forgettable, unremarkable. But one piece caught the light differently. The face looked strange, the lettering along "In God We Trust" was slightly thickened. The eye, in particular, seemed duplicated. He set it aside, not thinking much of it until days later, when another hobbyist posted a nearly identical coin online. The similarities were too close. The collector sent his to a grading service, hoping for confirmation. When it came back certified as a 2014 double die obverse, he realized he had stumbled upon a modern rarity. Word spread slowly at first, then with the speed of obsession. Forum threads lit up. Coin news publications made cautious mention. And as more examples surfaced, just a few dozen, then perhaps 100, experts began cataloging the varieties. The most prominent among them, later labeled as 2014 1C double die obverse number 1, became the centerpiece of this strange chapter in penny history. Unlike older double dies, like the famous 1955 or 1972 cents, the 2014 version wasn't glaring. Its doubling required close inspection, especially in areas like Lincoln's eye and the word Liberty. But once seen, it could not be unseen. The sharp lines and distinct separation made it a textbook case, one that grading services quickly acknowledged and encapsulated. Collectors were intrigued not only by the error, but by the timing. How, in a world of computerized quality control and advanced die production, could a double die of this nature still occur? Theories emerged. Some suggested that during die preparation, a misalignment occurred during the hubbing process, the critical stage where a working die is imprinted with the coin's design. Others believed an early die stage showed doubling more clearly before being retired or repolished. Whatever the cause, its rarity was real. The U.S. Mint never officially acknowledged the error, but they didn't deny it either. As is often the case, the coins spoke for themselves. Over the next few years, collectors scoured their change, coin rolls, and mint sets in hopes of finding their own example. Demand steadily grew as more hobbyists entered the fold, and prices began to climb. Early sales in online marketplaces showed modest increases, $50, then $75, then $100. But once grading services like PCGS and NGC began certifying the coins and listing population reports, the frenzy intensified. One young collector from Oregon found a near-perfect example in a roll purchased from a grocery store bank kiosk. When he submitted it for grading, it returned as MS-67 red. That coin later sold privately to a prominent Lincoln cent specialist for $1 for 100. Another example, also in MS-67 red, crossed the auction block in 2023. The bidding war was fierce, fueled not just by rarity, but by growing demand for modern coin errors, especially ones with verifiable mint origin issues. When the gavel dropped, the final price was $2 100. The twist came when a handful of off-center 2014 cents with the same doubling appeared. While rare, they introduced a new layer to the story. These weren't just doubled, they were misaligned during striking, creating elliptical planchets or partial designs. When these two errors combined, it sent collectors into a frenzy. A dual-error modern cent, in brilliant uncirculated condition, is a unicorn few ever see. By 2024, the 2014 doubled die cent had earned a place in the pantheon of modern U.S. coin errors. Not quite as famous as its 1955 predecessor, but far more elusive than most contemporary mistakes. It became a cautionary tale about the fallibility of even the most automated systems. Today, its value continues to climb, quietly, steadily. Uncertified examples can still be found in the wild for those with a keen eye and a touch of luck. But high-grade, slab specimens, especially those with clean fields and full red coloration, fetch serious money. In MS-66 red, they often sell for $300 to $500. In MS-67 red, expect to see prices nearing $500. And for those few flawless coins, with near-perfect surfaces and powerful doubling, the figure can rise even higher. One verified MS-68 red example with strong eye doubling and full cartwheel luster recently sold at auction for $200. A single cent, struck amid billions, transformed by one microscopic error into a trophy for collectors. Its story, like its value, continues to grow, cent by cent, year by year,